So let's get on with the show, and I'd like to introduce you to our first speaker today, who is David Rowan, Editor-in-Chief of Wired UK, the magazine that's kind of on the pulse of the technology trends around the world. David has had, in the last year, about 120 flights globally, where he's been looking at disruptive technologies and companies that are leading the way. For example, Google, LinkedIn, Xiaomi, Spotify, and Nest. So he's looking at all the different trends that are impacting consumer and B2B businesses. He's going to talk today about the new rules of business in a digital world and how emerging technology and disruptive companies are going to impact your business. So I think there's no better person to talk about that, and very welcome, David. No. Are you okay? Thank you.
Nice to be here, thank you. And I'm going to bribe the audience with magazines for the best questions. So would you like to choose who gets the bribes?
I will indeed.
So I want to talk about the accelerating nature of change among your customers, the Moore's Law acceleration curve that's changing the way people discover products, the way they choose to buy products, and pretty much everything. Everywhere I look at the moment, I see a lot, I'm getting pretty astounded by stuff that wasn't there a couple of months ago. At the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas just a couple of weeks ago, there were drones that weren't the sort of drones you and I think of as things we can play with in the park or go drone racing. There were drones that could carry you across the city. This is a Chinese company called Ehang that is making drones big enough to carry a person. So if you want to commute into Soho from Euston Square, maybe this is the way you will be doing this in the near future.
After setting up the flight plan with a single click, user can take off on any location.
What about commerce coming to the consumer? This is not the future, this is now. And Amazon's ambitions are just huge. It seems that they're quietly setting up a global distribution network, not just involving these, but involving flying airplanes. You can go to YouTube channels like Alex Chacon's, where he travels around the world with his drone, photographing him. I think Alex must have a hard time getting a date because the girl knows that he's only going to be looking up there and all his attention's going there. And just think of robotics and artificial intelligence and how that is starting to impact the consumer. The idea of the self-driving car is moving to the streets because it's going to save, well, there's 1.2 million lives lost a year through human-created accidents, and the insurance companies and the health services are going to push for the self-driving car, which again is going to transform consumer expectations, and we're not quite there yet.
Gosh, this is I'm not touching it at all, and it's driving.
This is Tesla's self-driving car. That was just the Tesla downloaded the software overnight. Think of robotics. This is the company that Google bought. Boston Dynamics was making robots for the military. It's now starting to consumerize this technology. You know, it used to be a $10 million project. They kick their robot dogs a lot, but I'm assured no robot dogs were harmed in this. But just think about what this could mean for direct connection with the customer. Not necessarily everything that's being tried now is going to work. This is a project coming out of Singapore University. This is your new PA.
Nice to see you.
What is your job?
I am a social companion. I can distinguish emotions and recognize people. I recognize your Nadia. Nice to meet you, the entity.
Yeah, I think your receptionist is safe for another 6 months or 9 months. But I guess what's connecting all this is the falling cost of computing and the growing ability of everything to have a computer. You know, the Raspberry Pi that cost $4, so cheap, the latest Raspberry Pi, that they could give it away free on a magazine. And this trend is hitting how people are going to get physical goods. You know, 3D printing. This gentleman in the space station needed a new wrench. It was emailed to him as an attachment and then printed in the local 3D printer. Or think of this sort of technology. Again, I'm constantly having to readjust what I think of as this cool new tech called 3D printing. It's now what they use in China to build houses. 18 houses built in one day, through 3D printing. Last year, about this time, the Carbon 3D, a new kind of 3D printer, was launched, and this is in real time printing the Eiffel Tower in the blue goo, which is actually like 100 times quicker than the existing state-of-the-art 3D printing. So you're going to have to suddenly start readjusting. Does that mean everybody will be downloading their sneakers from the local Nike store? There's even 3D printed cars coming, by the way. This is a company called Local Motors. American company, but it's opening local branches. It's opening one in Berlin, where it'll print a roadworthy car for you. So when you start to think of this Moore's Law curve, stuff that used to be expensive pretty much becoming free, it changes the nature of things. It changes business opportunities, changes how you have to serve those customers. 1994, if I'd have said to you, let's create a business where we give away millions of terabytes of storage, that would have made no sense. But Dropbox comes along, suddenly it changes the nature. You've got to be at the right time of that curve. And that is not just hitting computing, it's hitting genomics. The falling cost of sequencing human DNA, the green line, this is a logarithmic scale, is falling from $100 million about 15 years ago to just a few $100s now, falling more steeply than Moore's Law. What does that mean for, medicine? What does that mean for the state tracking its citizens? How quickly a company is coming from nowhere to become a billion-dollar company. This acceleration is changing the speed at which some new device comes from nowhere and gets mainstream acceptance. And this is often challenging for a successful existing company. Of course, I guess the nature of successful companies is you're wedded to your profit model at the moment. So let's go back to 1983 when this gadget hits the market with celebrity endorsers. But let's say you're the big incumbent. AT&T, the company with more landlines in the world, millions of miles of copper cable. Do you invest in the mobile technology or do you ignore it hoping it's going to pass? So AT&T didn't know, so they called in McKinsey to say, give us a good estimate of how many mobile telephones there will be in North America by the end of the 20th century in 17 years. And McKinsey goes and does its number crunching, and they come back with a number, and they said, well, we think it could be fairly significant. We think almost 1 million mobile phones in America by 2000, which wasn't a bad guess, it was slightly out. And there's 3 things McKinsey got wrong, which I think we should all think about when we think about technology. First of all, it's not the form factor. Moore's Law does change how useful something is, how portable something is. Secondly, it's not about the technology, the gigahertz, the megabits. It's about whether it connects with the consumer emotionally, whether it simplifies their task, whether it allows them to express their identity. And third, McKinsey made the mistake of framing their thinking in a very fixed 1983 way, and social norms changed quite quickly. In 1983, if you wanted to make a phone call, you would go to the public phone box, you would go back to the office or to home. Today, if you take this away from a 15-year-old for more than 6 seconds, it's a human rights abuse, you will be sent to The Hague. So very quickly, what this acceleration is doing to commerce in particular, to the way people are discovering and buying products, there's 10 things I'm seeing. And the first of all, I guess the key thing is just how far this is changing things. Maslow's hierarchy of needs needs to be readjusted now because of the importance of these devices. Reddit, the chat forum, somebody posted 2 years ago, it's an amazing question. If somebody from the 50s suddenly reappeared, what would be the hardest thing to explain to them about modern life? And my favorite answer was, I have a device in my pocket capable of accessing the entirety of information known to man, and I use it to look at pictures of cats and get into arguments with strangers. And I'd like you to address your own behavior. We're now so addicted to apps that there are apps just to tell you how many times a day you're checking your apps. There are new medical conditions. This is called the 3-dot anxiety. You can get treatment upstairs. I was in China recently. Our next issue is about innovation coming out of China. This is a country with no religion apart from narcissism everywhere you go. And in fact, selfies are no longer cool. The Belfie, the rear end selfie, this was a product released last year. This is actually more interesting. Although the queen of the Belfie, Kim, released a free online game just over a year ago. You don't have to pay to download it. You pay a bit of money if you want to move more quickly. Her free game in 5 months earned her $43 million, which again, it's the kind of crazy behavior people have in this world. And I'm going to give you just one statistic, which is from a slide that Mary Meeker of Kleiner Perkins released a few months ago. This is the amount of time American adults spend on their digital screens. The green is mobile, the blue is laptop, desktop, the yellow is other devices, from 2008 to 2015. And the key thing to notice is it's gone from 2.7 hours a day to 5.6 hours a day, doubling, and that's time that they're not spending talking to their colleagues, going for walks with human beings. A lot of very successful existing companies are still moving at their own pace. You've got to move at these paces. And it's not just in the West, it's changing the nature of even the people who were offline, who don't have funds. They're finding funds. There's companies like MCent working in Asia and Africa that's giving people phone credit in order to look at adverts, in order to do consumer surveys. And it's growing at an amazing rate. And in China, I was seeing companies like this commerce site, it's called Little Red Book. People start blogging about products they've seen outside China, and there's recommendations, there's likes. It's like a Pinterest for stuff you can buy. It's come from nowhere after about 18 months with a valuation over $1 billion. And of course, the company knows what people like, so they can wholesale the goods and sell them directly. It's only because of these devices. So in the short term, the notification, I think, is going to be where a lot of the interaction with customers goes. It starts again in China. WeChat is an app that everybody uses 60, 70 times a day. You can book transport, you can book medical appointments, you do everything in it. And then Mark Zuckerberg decides that wasn't such a bad idea, so the reason he forced you to download Messenger to collect your mobile messages was because he's turning Messenger into a platform that commerce companies and all sorts of other businesses can build a presence on, because he's realized that's the place the consumer goes to with the least possible friction. Nobody wants to phone up to change their airline ticket. Nobody wants to message the commerce company. You want that connectivity to be as seamless as chatting with your friends. And so in the early days of Facebook Messenger, KLM is one of their early partners. You can inquire about a flight ticket, you can book the flight ticket, you can get notified when it's time to check in, which gate number, if there's problems afterwards. And they have the history of your relationship with them in a conversation thread, and they will get back to you within minutes. There's even an AI they've created that allows customers to automate the way they're speaking to commerce companies. And I think it's why a lot of online fast growth companies have decided they need to be messaging companies. Instagram becomes a messaging company. Snapchat, I guess a messaging company, becomes a media company because they realize that's where the attention is. So when all this is happening, quietly, probably trillions of little sensors are being placed in our physical world so that everything physical is part of the network. And it starts slowly and then accelerates in a crazy way. So like me, many of you will have these smart devices starting to appear in your home. Tony Fadell led the iPod team at Apple, and then Steve said, hey, I got this idea for a phone, would you work on that with me? But he leaves to create a thermostat business because he realizes that this glamorous, unsexy world of the physical device that knows who's in the room, that collects data, that interacts with you, that learns with you, that could be something, which is why Google bought this thermostat company 2 years ago for $3.2 billion. But think about the amount of data that rooms like this will be collecting. Think about what you are already wearing and where it goes. Just a couple of weeks ago, a company in Munich called Bragi released these InEar headphones that, because sensors from mobile phones are coming down in price, they're adopting these, they're putting them in there. So it's everything from your health tracking devices, your accelerometer, your gyroscope, but also they've got a little laser, infrared, that goes inside your headphones that points into the capillaries in your ear. They claim they can use that to check your heartbeat, your blood oxygen level. So if you're a sports person, this is all sorts of useful data. Think of stuff that was online, like your basketball. It's now a connected basketball that's sending back data to the network. Think of the street. This is something we did at Wired. The taxi gets direction based on your online schedule. The sandwich shop knows who you are, knows you're approaching, starts to make your chicken sandwich before you get there. Probably more important, the smartphone warns you of an ex-girlfriend or boyfriend ahead so you can cross the street. There's even an internet of babies now. I don't know if you're a parent, but you can now buy these devices that track your kid and send you notification. This one you put on the ankle of the baby. I thought this is what we did with convicted criminals, but apparently it's now responsible parenting. Which leads me to warn about, just because it's so easy and cheap to connect sensors to things, doesn't mean it's always that smart. It's just what I call the internet of stupid things. I'm starting to see a lot of companies say, hey, we've got a sensor embedded X. A company called Quirky, if you're obsessed with the freshness of your milk wherever you're in the world, if you're on a business trip, it's the milkmaid that's got sensors that sends you urgent notifications when your milk is starting to go sour. So presumably you fly back or you cancel your meetings. They also, for egg freshness obsessives, they released the $50 smart egg tray with urgent notifications, again, to tell you when you're running out of eggs. Quirky went out of business a couple of months ago, but this is the internet of stupid things. It's just like, just because the tools are there and readily available doesn't mean people should be allowed to use them. Just because this Chinese hairdresser had access to a free online translation service to try and turn its name into English doesn't mean it should have been allowed to use that free translation service. At the same time, artificial intelligence, as you saw with Alexa upstairs, is becoming pretty smart. And I guess by 2020, a lot of businesses are going to be reinventing themselves as AI-based businesses. So it's starting already. You know, the self-driving cars, this is the Google with the blind man in their self-driving car. Think of, you know, already factory automation. This is the Tesla factory. One example of where this could be going, this is a London entrepreneur called Demis Hassabis who runs a company called DeepMind, just behind King's Cross around the corner. They're trying to build general artificial intelligence, not just solving picture recognition or translation, but everything. And that's a big, like 30-year at least, project. And so when I went to see Demis, he had no revenue, he had no products, but they were very excited. They'd finally taught the network how to play Space Invaders just by reading the pixels and seeing if it would learn patterns. He said the first half hour it kept getting killed. An hour later it starts to learn where to hide, where to shoot. He said we left it on all night. By the morning it was the world's best ever Space Invader player. Then Google buys this Space Invader playing company for 400 million pounds. You may have seen 2 weeks ago they made the news because they'd finally met a great challenge. They had beaten the European champion of a very hard to play game called Go.
Now it's a company.
This is him on the left.
But I lose all my game.
He's not a happy man, beaten by an AI.
AlphaGo won 5-0, which is the first time ever a program has beaten a professional player. The way I see where we are now is that we've beaten the European champion now, and the next step for us is to try and challenge the legendary player Lee Sedol, who you can think of as the Roger Federer of Go.
You didn't know there was a Roger Federer in Go, so you've learned something today. AI plus data provides really interesting insights on where consumers are shopping. This is a company called Orpal Insight that reads real-time satellite data to monitor car parks of shopping malls, of Walmarts, to tell hedge fund clients way before the markets where there's falling or rising demand. Sentient, another AI company, is working with shoes.com at the point of checkout to optimize what else you could sell to people. There's a London company that I've been working with a bit called Improbable that's building a real-time engine to simulate massive amounts of autonomous activity. This is something they released a couple of weeks ago. They want to simulate whole cities. They want to simulate economic markets based on programming into each of maybe billions of entities what they would do in the real world. So obviously useful in games to make them more realistic, but they're using them in military training, and they're working out how to treat this in commerce. And then you start to use the AI to analyze how people are speaking. So this is a company in Tel Aviv that's helping call centers analyze the emotions in real time of the people calling up so they can prioritize who is going to defect to another company. What about visual analysis? This is a company called Emotion that's reading facial expressions.
What if your devices could read your emotions and respond to them? Emotion is developing technology to do just that. Our industry-leading emotion-aware system will enable a revolution in device and application personalization. We're taking more pictures and videos than ever before. Imagine organizing this content by emotion, so your most memorable moments are easier to find.
Apple bought that company last month. Interesting. Although my favorite application of face recognition is this American company, Churchix, that sells its services to churches so they can tell who wasn't in the congregation that Sunday but claimed to be, which I think is genius entrepreneurialism. So at the same time, you are no longer in charge. We've had one of these kind of Marxist revolution where power's been distributed to the network. So we've moved from the boss to the network deciding what happens, and that's starting to affect how people spend money. So obvious example, these people have had to cede power to these people, but also stuff that is hard to really understand at first. BlaBlaCar, the French company, offering ride sharing between cities, couldn't get funding for ages because the VCs said, well, people don't want to share cars with strangers. They've just been valued at $1.6 billion. So when you connect people on the network, they bypass traditional systems of commerce. In Kuwait, I saw that the sheep farmers of Kuwait now trade their cattle, their sheep, on this Instagram page, not in the physical cattle market. This is a real phone number if you want to buy a sheep for your loved one. Nobody gives them permission to do this, it's just convenient. They are on the network. What do these companies have in common? Games company, dating company, travel company, they all allow you to pay with a currency that the crowd, rather than the bank, owns, called Bitcoin. It doesn't look like this because there's no physical version. It's a digital, it's a concept, but it's gaining huge value, not particularly because of the Bitcoin itself, but because of the real-time record of every transaction called the blockchain. There's a whole ecosystem growing. Smart people like Reid Hoffman, founder of LinkedIn and a very successful investor, are putting a lot of money into blockchain-type businesses because they realized where you've got a trustworthy distributed ledger, it could be everything from the place you store your land registry details to the way that the tax authorities monitor every transaction. We're just at the beginning of this. And then something new comes along, and this year is the year of virtual reality. I was at TED last week, and I guess the big theme of TED this year was a lot of companies from Microsoft to Facebook to Samsung are releasing their devices. And that's going to change very quickly the expectation of people deciding how they're going to spend money. If you're in the travel business, you can't just give them a photo. You have to immerse them in the beach. If you're in real estate, you have to take them into the unbuilt apartment, which leads to some crazy, ugly stuff. This is a company that allows you to do exercise whilst watching VR. Hope nobody you know sees you doing this. But it also means kind of unpredictable things. Magic Leap is a company that so far raised $1.3 billion, and we don't know what it's going to do. It's just released these kind of mysterious videos online. They've released, I think, 2 videos. It may be a business to do with miniature flying elephants. But you know that the big smart money is putting quite a lot of commitment behind this. So we're in this world where you expect a personalized service because the network collects so much data about you. And I guess you get your personalized radio station and your personalized genome. So increasingly in commerce, you're going to want something that nobody else has. And we're starting to see it in fashion. There's a London company called Unmade, some RCA graduates that are using the ability to customize the design of your clothes, and they'll print them out at normal prices. Even McDonald's in
方面，除咗平時嘅漢堡包啊、薯條之外，主要就係多咗即叫即製嘅沙律吧啦。點餐方法同之前 Create Your Taste 嘅自選漢堡一樣，喺呢部機度篤篤篤，揀出自己嘅心水。
So there is no one commerce. At the same time, the winners are going to be those that can design experiences rather than sell products. There is a generation that is never going to be doing this and will never be tolerant of this because they don't want any friction in their life. They want the seamless experience, which this man, Jan Koum, understood when he created this. There's a post-it note on his desk that's been there for 3 years from his co-founder, Brian Acton, that just says, no ads, no games, no gimmicks. Keep it simple. Just allow WhatsApp to allow people to communicate. Don't complicate their lives. So this company that's bought by Facebook for 19 billion 2 years ago, how much did they have to spend on marketing plus sales plus PR plus advertising? Nothing, because design something with no friction, your customers will do the marketing. Although when it was sold, the BBC reported it was because Zuckerberg saw it as an incredibly valuable WhatsApp massaging service, which to me made more sense. And anybody who is interacting with customers, I think, should start thinking about this concept called the desire path, which is however you decide people should transact, they will go for the shortest path. I bought some skis online yesterday, and before they let me pay, they forced me to register. And I was so angry with them, I almost went somewhere else. It has to be for the convenience of the customer. I was in Singapore. They even have desire paths in this rural-infested land called Singapore. I went for a run in this private road where they got very, very thick grass to stop you crossing the road in the wrong place. But even in Singapore, people have created a desire path. And I guess when you're in a world where you touch a button and magic happens, you don't even have to do anything when you're paying for your Uber. You don't even have to touch your phone. When you join Uber, you don't even have to type in the credit card number, you photograph it. This kills the friction. And I guess we're in a world where people want stuff delivered to them at that moment. Amazon is even paying customers to deliver to other customers. It's that real time, I don't want anything in the way of my experience. That's the company that's going to get the transaction. We're even seeing delivery robots to get things to you very quickly. This is a company called Starship, created by founders of Skype. They're very excited about this. I tell them good luck in Peckham with your delivery robot. There's a couple of other things I think you can have a little business advantage if you're selling things to people. One of them is reassuring them that their details are not going to be leaked, because this is going to be the headline story of the next 5 years at least. The network is vulnerable in all sorts of places. I'll give you one example. I don't know how many of you own this £4,000 smart toilet called the Sartis with apps that you can use to deodorize and flush. Very, very cool toilet. There was a security consultant 18 months ago released a report that the Sartis was vulnerable to hacking. And if somebody didn't like you, they could access your toilet from anywhere in the world and set it to deodorize all night, and there was nothing you could do about it. And I tell you this not to make you an expert in the hackable toilet, just to make you think that everywhere there will be armies of state-sponsored hackers, mafia hackers accessing your network. And already you can go to online services to buy freelance hacking service. You can hack a girl's webcam for $1. You can hack a boy's webcam for a penny, which I think is slightly unfair. But just bear in mind, John Chambers at Cisco pretty much said it at Davos last year. And finally, the last thing that successful commerce businesses will keep doing is questioning what kind of business they are, because in a commodified world where everybody has access to the tools, how do you stand out? You add a service layer or a design layer. Who here would love to run a physical bookshop in the most expensive bits of London in Mayfair? Any hands? So Hayward Hill Books has been there since the 1930s, royal coat of arms. You'd think it was a struggling business, but they've realized quite smartly that their business is not selling books, it's knowing about books, it's curating books. So they're now offering their services to people who want to create libraries. So Hayward Hill Books recently curated a library for a high net worth individual in their ski chalet in Switzerland. 3,000 books, they charged £500,000. That's actually a better way of framing a business. And everywhere you go, you see companies that are reframing have an advantage. Do you go to Starbucks for coffee, or do you go there to recharge your devices? This gentleman, Josh Kushner, made a lot of money in New York investing in tech companies. So he thinks, right, I'm going to do something I've never done. I'm going to create an insurance company called Oscar to offer a new kind of health insurance based on what it would be like if it were a tech startup, talking about it in terms that tech companies would use. User experience, it's growing really fast. Multi-billion-dollar company after about 3 years. When I was in China, I went to this company, Xiaomi. This is Lei Jun, who's often been called the Steve Jobs of China. They're rethinking what they are. They make no margin on the hardware, so they're investing in startups, putting just like $100,000 in, and then using the startups, they've done 56 so far, to sell accessories branded with Xiaomi, like air purifiers or power banks, and that's where they're making their profit. They're kind of rethinking the rules. They're innovating. Be bold. This is Supercell, one of the biggest games companies in the world, in Finland. They haven't released a product for a couple of years, really, but they earn $5 million a day because they know what works. And when they test a new product and they don't launch it, they celebrate with champagne. So I'm finally going to suggest that we can learn from this man about innovation. This is Tony Hsieh, created a company called Zappos, a shoe retailer that he sold to Amazon for about $1 billion. He's worked out that you have to keep challenging what kind of company Zappos is by creating collisions of people with different expertise. This is the office in Zappos. It's like a jungle. And he's moved his staff into the downtown bit of Las Vegas, away from the snazzy casinos, very kind of poor, malnourished area. And he's spending $350 million of his own money to create a set of incubators, workspaces, bringing in cool restaurants, cool cafes. Because he realizes what he calls the 3 C's. You have to create like a town square where there'll be collision, co-learning and connectedness, and that's how you can create kind of new value. It's a bit like the Burning Man culture. Bring people to the desert for a week and magic happens. At Pixar, Steve Jobs, when he took over, decided there would be one set of toilets in the middle of the first floor so that the animators would have to meet the accountants and new conversations would start, which is why these sorts of cool workplaces like Second Home in East London is growing, because it brings people together. So I will leave you with the inevitability of a new product coming out. This is 2007. And what will determine if it works for you is how you respond. This is the boss of another company that made smartphones, was asked on television what he thought of the iPhone, and he dismissed it in public.
$500 fully subsidized with a plan? I said, that is the most expensive phone in the world, and it doesn't appeal to business customers because it doesn't have a keyboard, which makes it not a very good email machine.
How did that work out, Steve Ballmer of Microsoft? Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.